Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. It's looking a little Christmassy up here on top of the hill, but down there in the valley it's all still looking pretty agricultural. And over here, I've been working a little bit on the surrounding environment for the sugarcane farm, not least because I wanted to do something about the connection to the river here. I mentioned that in the last episode, and as you can see, I've started laying out a kind of walkway, a sort of retaining wall there separating the area around the sugarcane farm from this river. And the problem with this now is that it's using a lot of smooth stone to build up the side of this cliff here, and I want to make it out of smooth stone and stone brick, so I'm having to acquire quite a lot of stone, and I've pretty much run out. I've only got about a stack of cobblestone left in the house. I haven't really got enough to smelt into a significant amount more of this stone. Now, I could go strip mining, as I've been doing off camera every now and again. You might have noticed occasional resources in the chest. Look at that creeper down there, just minding his own business. What I decided to do today was something a little bit different, and it's something you might want to try if you are in need of a great deal of resources, but you don't necessarily want to get the precious stuff. You just want to get stone and stone variants. So the plan today is to start a quarry, and quarries can take a number of different forms, obviously. You can do any kind of design you want with a quarry. It could be a more kind of free-form industrial pit kind of thing. People have made step wells and stuff like that, but generally speaking, it's a good idea to start a quarry if you just want a large quantity of resources. There are even quarrying mods if you play modded Minecraft, where you can just set up an area and it mines everything right the way down to bedrock unless you stop it beforehand, and those are pretty useful. Those tend to generate a whole amount of resources without you really needing to lift a finger. In Minecraft Vanilla, that is not so much the case. In Minecraft Vanilla, you do need to put in a fair amount of work, and so I'm coming out to somewhere I think about over here is probably a good idea to start a quarry, or maybe if there's like a natural pit that forms on the opposite side of this, because generally speaking, if you want to start a quarry, it's a good idea to start it in a location that feels quarry-ish. And you know what? About here actually feels like a good location for it. We've got these natural slopes on all the sides, kind of almost implying that the area has been dug away a little bit already. But it's just going to be a matter of starting a quarry here and starting just to dig down. Now, I've brought a few things in preparation for this. I've got a couple of shulker boxes I can bring with me to put resources in. I'm also going to set up a few chests on what I think is probably going to be the perimeter of this area so that I can store resources when I come back up to the surface. And the reason I recommend starting a surface quarry instead of just continuing to strip mine, even though, like I said, those precious resources are kind of useful, is because it makes sense for an area like this. We're working with a kind of medieval set of builds here. We're working with a medieval build style. I think it's going to be kind of natural to have a quarry around here, because all of these builds, all of the stone in these builds would have had to come from somewhere, and chances are the people of this civilization would be digging it out of the ground in large quantities. So an organized quarry seems like it's something that we could introduce to this area. It's also something that we can build structures around to make it look a little bit more interesting. We can build kind of towers with a sort of primitive elevator and that kind of thing. We can build all sorts of stuff. We can even build cranes to drag the materials out of the ground, almost like what we've got over in front of the sugarcane farm over here. We could build another little platform like that and have that be dragging materials and resources up from the depths of our quarry. I feel like that seems like a fun idea. I'm going to light this area up because stuff keeps spawning in here while I'm over here working on the sugarcane farm. So we're going to do a bit of digging, and in the process, we can learn a little bit more about what it means to dig, because we have a few different things aside from our own tools, which are, rapidly losing durability at this point. We have a few other things we can use to dig out this area. And yes, my friends, I'm talking about explosives. Where did we put the TNT that we gathered from that desert temple? Was it in the ender chest? Was it in one of these somewhere? No, it doesn't look like it. So we must have it around here somewhere. Perhaps with the tools? Yes, there we go. TNT is a marvelous resource. First of all, the basic principle of TNT is that it needs to be lit. Once placed, it is in a kind of inert state, and it can be activated in a number of ways. Method number one is by simply right-clicking on it using a flint and steel, and then running a safe distance away. And as you can see, that creates a crater of a decent sort of size when it's dealing with material like dirt. Dirt has a fairly low blast resistance, and blast resistance is something that I've covered very briefly in previous episodes when I've talked about the differences between lining a tunnel with cobblestone and lining it with wood, for example. Or in the last episode, I think I mentioned that quartz has a fairly low blast resistance. However, once you get down to materials like stone, stone has a much higher blast resistance than dirt. So when we set the TNT here, you will notice a difference in the amount of blocks that are actually broken. It's not that many. It's not as many as it was with the dirt anyway, because stone has a higher blast resistance and is a lot more capable of resisting things like TNT explosions and creeper explosions. Not only that, but the amount of stone we have actually broken here has led to me only getting 3 cobblestone back, and that is the disadvantage of using TNT for quarrying purposes. It destroys blocks. You will not get back every block that you destroy with TNT. So while it is good for digging large holes, if you need a hole in the ground for aesthetic purposes, if you want to use it for a build or something like that, if you want to get all the resources back in the process, that's probably not the best idea. While we've got these cobblestone on me though, I'm going to craft a lever, and I'm going to show you one of the other aspects of TNT is that it can be detonated remotely using redstone. Now, I don't have any redstone on me right now, and I'm not going to run back to the house to get some quite yet, but you can actually activate TNT using a redstone signal. By just activating that lever next to it, I've been able to light that TNT, and once again it has blown a hole in the ground and left me with only 3 cobblestones, so still not ideal. But if any of the blocks adjacent to a block of TNT receive a redstone signal, then that TNT is going to light and detonate. And obviously that has a potential to destroy stuff in the surrounding area, including some of the redstone wire that you place down. And sometimes by destroy, I just mean it'll break it, and whatever's been used to light it will just drop on the ground and you can pick it up again. But for more fragile stuff like redstone wire, chances are it may not last the explosion. So we do need to be a little bit careful about that kind of stuff. While we're on the topic of blowing things up though, there is one more explosive in the game that I feel is sometimes overlooked, and that may be mostly because of the expense, but I figured, seeing as we're in the mood for blowing things up here, I may as well show it to you. So I am going to craft an end crystal. You may recognize end crystals from the time we spent killing the dragon in the end, and that is because it is actually possible to regenerate the dragon with these crystals. And I can never remember if the recipe requires glass or glass panes, so let's find out. Okay, it is glass. Good. I was worried that it would be glass panes around there, because what you get looks like a flat pane of glass with something embedded in it. But in fact, end crystals are a very dangerous and very volatile substance, and for that reason, they can only be placed on obsidian or bedrock. Now, we're going to place ours on obsidian, if I can find where I put the obsidian. Ah, yeah, there it is. Okay, because bedrock isn't something that you can place in the world. It's not a block you can acquire, and so you could only really place these on bedrock, either if you're in the end and re-summoning the dragon, or if you're at the bottom of the world in the overworld, at which point you'd probably not be blowing a huge amount of stuff up. But end crystals are a very volatile substance, and as if you saw the dragon fight episode, you will know quite how large those explosions can be. I mentioned that it is usually best to avoid standing near one of these end stone crystals, and that is with good reason. I'm going to pop down an obsidian there, I'm going to place the end crystal on top, and then we have to be very, very careful, because the hitbox of these things is quite large, and if I happen to tap it with anything, even my fist, I will probably end up destroying myself. So I'm going to step back a couple of spaces here. I'm actually going to try and break the obsidian from below like this. And there we go. The end crystal is live, and it's been live for a little while, but the best way of triggering these from a distance is to stand back a good way away and then shoot it with a bow. And I'm actually going to get a vantage point from up here if I can, because we're about to see quite a large explosion. It's probably going to be about twice, maybe 3 times the size of the TNT, and here we go. Yep, that's a pretty big crater compared to what the TNT was leaving, and it has left us a few more blocks, but once again, the explosion has destroyed a lot of them. Also, end crystals, as you saw, are quite an expensive recipe. They require you to make an Eye of Ender, use up a ghast tier, which are not all that easy to farm, believe me, and a fair amount of glass is involved there as well, whereas TNT is just gunpowder and sand, both of which you can get in fairly large quantities once you've killed enough creepers and spent enough time in a desert. And once again, this has left a fairly square hole. The thing about explosions in Minecraft is that they have a fairly limited radius like that, and will typically just carve out a very geometric area. So if we want to turn this into a more natural looking quarry, it's probably best to use our pickaxe and do this all by hand. Not only that, but like I said, if we want to acquire all of the blocks from this quarry operation, then it is probably a good idea to do this all by hand in any case. Not least because right now I'm using my Silk Touch pickaxe, so I'll be getting a lot of smooth stone, which is the material that I want to build with over here anyway. But I'd like to acquire a lot of cobblestone as well, so to that end I have brought myself some of the spare pickaxes that I ended up getting from the end city. So I've got my fortune pickaxe here, my fortune 2 pickaxe, which is the kind of backup fortune one, I guess. And that one, we can mend the fortune 3 pickaxe if we want to, but that one's going to get us cobblestone, where the silk touch one will get us smooth stone. I realize I didn't explain this super well just then, but if you have obsidian underneath one of those end crystals, it will not damage anything below it. The reason I took the obsidian out from below the end crystal there was so that it would blow up the ground underneath it. But the obsidian, because it has such a high blast resistance and is such a tough block, will typically block explosion damage to anything directly below the end crystals. So they'll typically damage a lot of stuff around them on the surface, and they can be absolutely lethal to both players and mobs if used that way. But you want to remove the obsidian from below them if you want them to blow a hole in the ground like this. What I'm thinking is it might be fun to establish a perimeter of sorts for this quarry. Let's establish some dark oak logs here that we can quite easily farm in large quantities, and we'll set out a kind of outer boundary for the quarry. Maybe we'll make this about a chunk wide, actually, and I can show you in the process how to see chunks in the world. If you press F3 and G together, it will come up with this grid, like so, and unfortunately this one falls on a chunk boundary. Where you see those yellow lines there, those are the boundaries of each of our chunks, and it displays each section of this in a 2x2 square, so you can kind of count them nice and easily. 8 of those squares makes a single chunk, and if you look upwards, the chunk basically continues from bedrock to build height, but there are these things called sub-chunks, which are marked out with those blue lines there, which are kind of 16 blocks high, as well as being 16 blocks wide and 16 blocks deep. Since our chests are over here, I reckon we'll probably mark out the edge of this chunk like so, and maybe make it a 2-chunk wide quarry in the end. So we'll put a couple of logs over here and a couple of logs over here, and at this point, yeah, we're pretty much deciding anything in between the boundaries of these logs is fair game. Ultimately, I don't want this quarry to get huge. I don't want it to dwarf the landscape around it, and I certainly don't want it to look like an eyesore next to all of the nice builds that I'm planning. So we're going to make it look nice in the end, but for now, I do want to just strip out a ton of the stone from around here. So what do you say we go to a time lapse, and I'll keep digging. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the time lapse, and with only about 40 minutes work put into that, I've managed to get myself almost a full chest of regular stone and another 14 stacks of cobblestone, give or take. So that's not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that, and at least having this amount of stone means that we can work a little bit more on that perimeter wall and maybe even start the bridge that I want to build between the farm settlement bit over here and the industrial area where the sugarcane farm is, because I think it's been too long where I've just been either flying up here using an ender pearl or just trying to scramble up the side of this hill over here. I think having a bridge from one to the other is probably going to be a good idea. It's also going to be a great way of transitioning between the materials I'm using in these two different areas, which is going to be quite a subtle transition because this place over here is mainly kind of oak, spruce, and cobblestone, and over here we started using stone brick and dark oak wood, so we can kind of transition from one material to another and kind of be a little bit more symbolic about the transition between the two areas using the materials that I want to use, especially now I've got so much cobblestone and smooth stone to use. But believe me, that stuff is going to run out super quickly, especially considering we are building solid stone walls over here, and one of the reasons I want to do this primarily is to wall off this section here a little bit better, because this cave has just kind of been sat here open for a while, and it's the main reason I keep getting zombies and stuff, at least zombie noises, anytime I'm working around here on the sugarcane farm and so forth. So it's going to be nice to clear this area out a little bit and finish this whole project off. So part of the way I'm doing this here is just filling the entire thing up with stone for right now. We could always make this a little bit more hollow and just light up the insides, but just in case I want to do some functional stuff with this later, and just in case I want to, I don't know, pave this a little bit better, kind of swap out some of the blocks here for some like stone bricks, for example, here and there, it'll help to make the place look a little bit more organized. And it's the same approach I've taken with the wall down here, which you can't really see from this angle, so let me hop down and show you from this side. So I've put in a few stone bricks just to kind of create the illusion that this is a stone brick wall, but with less detail and not having to make the entire thing out of stone bricks. And that's a fun effect you can do when you're building things like castles or any kind of stone wall like this. Just dot in stone bricks here and there and make the rest of the stuff out of regular stone. And that's an effect that they use quite a lot in drawing, in kind of cartoons and stuff like that. You kind of leave little areas of detail over a blank surface, and that kind of implies that the entire thing is made out of bricks without it visually being too noisy and distracting from the details you want people to focus on, like the giant building that's up there, for example. So I think that's a pretty good approach, and it's an approach I plan to take for the rest of this perimeter wall. I might also make a lower wall sort of down here, and this is probably going to cover up a few of the materials I built here, but one of the things I've learned more recently when it comes to building stuff like this is not to worry too much about bits of your build being covered by new things. Say, for example, that you've just built a house that you're really, really happy with, but you decide to grow a giant tree out the front of it, and it almost feels at first like the tree is just blocking the view of the awesome build you've built. But then when it comes to stuff in the real world, people don't avoid planting trees just because the front of their house looks pretty. You know, people put trees there because trees are kind of awesome, and a lot of the time the trees are there first, and it helps the house feel a little bit better blended in with the terrain. So, you know, covering stuff up that you've already built is not such a bad thing. That's probably something we're going to cover when we end up making a few custom trees later in this series, because I do plan on building a few trees from scratch here and there. But like I'm saying with this, you know, we've already put some materials into here. We've already put some stone and some dark oak in here. And if we were being really kind of careful with how we're using materials, we could potentially save some of the materials which are now kind of buried behind here if we wanted to, just by removing some of the stuff that's behind here and planning this out a little bit better. But for now, all we really need to do is fill up this area with stone. And given the amount of stone we have just finished collecting, it's not going to be too terrible, to be honest. Like, you know, you can be as conservative as you want to with your materials, but I think it's easier just to build as much as you want to, and then maybe we can figure out ways of conserving these materials later on. But in the meantime, we get to lend a little bit more structure to an area and have this kind of like low walkway around here, which could lead around the side of this hill to something else. And it means we get to copy the structure of the wall up there, but on a smaller scale, put in these logs as supports and so forth. I need to harvest myself a little bit more dark oak before we can continue with that, but it's already lending so much more structure to this area to include stuff like this. Now maybe instead of the pile of grass here, we could put in a tree growing out of here or something, or we could maybe put a little storage area where there are crates and chests and barrels and that kind of stuff. Although barrels aren't technically in the game yet, there are a lot of fun things we can do with the existing blocks that would simulate the appearance of a barrel at least. And working on this low wall down here has actually made me realize that we need to widen out the river, not just because the river naturally comes to a stop there and then continues into this winding section through the mountains over there, but because by building this wall out, we are actually narrowing the river even further. So it would help to do a little bit of artificial terraforming around here just to make it look like this river kind of flowed around and give a reason for this to exist. Widening out the river might also kind of imply that there could be canal barges kind of taking supplies from the sugarcane farm out to whatever sea exists in that direction. And already we can start to see how the city might take shape in terms of its trade and that kind of stuff. Like I said in previous episodes, when we approach projects like this, it's always a good idea to consider the story that you're telling here, the lore that you can weave into the world. And you don't have to take that to heart if you just want to build cool stuff, but if you're stuck for what to build and you're lacking in inspiration, that's definitely something to consider. This is also going to give me a chance to go into the perfectionist level of detail that I like to put in builds, because look around at the wall here, for example, and you'll see a few things that to my mind really need correcting. For a start, we do not want dirt showing down here at the foundations of our wall. We want the wall to look like it disappears into the sand and could go down as far as possible. Likewise, with the trunks of wood here, it's going to be unreasonable for them to just sit on this fragile looking wall of sand. So we want to actually put the trunks so that they are right down into the sand there, and they don't have to go down any further than this if there's a couple of blocks covering them like that, but it doesn't really look all that great to have them just resting on top of a block of gravel that could easily just kind of fall away and lead to structural instability. You know, that's the kind of thing that, realistically speaking, it wouldn't make sense for it to be there. And of course, you can build up sand in front of it, so you can always build little kind of sand bars like this, as though the current of the river has kind of pushed the sand up against the walls like this. That actually might be a pretty good justification for there being sand here kind of building up around the bottom of the wall. Could be a great detail to add. Below the waterline, you could even add in some mossy cobblestone or mossy stone brick to give the impression that the water is affecting this part. Oh, hello, there's an enderman up there. But yeah, give the impression that the water is affecting this part and is causing kind of damp environments and causing the moss to grow up the sides here, even above the waterline like so. You could even give the impression that there is a higher point to which the river rises in like periods of high rain, so that you could give a slightly darker line around there by using some slightly different material, maybe work in some andesite in here and there, or maybe do an andesite kind of stone brick combo along a certain level to ensure that the water doesn't get any higher than that. Include drainage in the wall even, kind of have holes carved out into there with iron bars in front of them. There's so much you can do to detail even a small area like this, which is going to add so much more character to your builds. But now, thanks to our little quarry project, I can go ahead and complete the rest of this little area around here, and I think it's going to look fantastic. Maybe throw a couple of leaves down here as well, as though little bushes are growing up the side. I think it's going to be fantastic. But I think we're going to call this episode there, folks. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on the episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.